This module, we're going to be looking at stacks and queues. These are our first real true crack at an abstract data type. We've taken a look at abstract data types once before, but we're going to take a look at these in depth. And you'll see that what we're going to do is going to be a little introduction, a little sidetrack. We're going to talk about exceptions, which are a software engineering concept that we're going to touch on here. And then we'll review the concept of abstraction and abstract data types, and then we'll get into it. We'll get into stacks and queues, what their behaviors are, what their interfaces are like, and some implementation details. And we'll analyze those details. But the key concept to keep in mind is that we are going to separate out interface and behavior from implementation. Okay? And that gets down to the key of what is abstraction and how do we implement an abstract data type. But first, before we get there, let's talk about exception handling. So what is exception handling? Exception handling is this process where you're going to anticipate and plan for runtime exceptions, exceptions that you couldn't technically stop ahead of time. The classic example of this is getting input from the user as an integer and then dividing by that number. Well, okay, that's going to work out great unless I put in a 0, and then you get a divide by 0 error. Okay, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. That is a toy example. Usually what we're talking about is, hey, I want to open a file and it's not there. Hey, I want to read from a database and I can't connect. Those sorts of things. If that happens, we want our code to fail gracefully. When code crashes, bad things happen. And they crash because the code goes, well, this was supposed to happen and it couldn't. So instead of trying to keep pushing on, the code goes, I don't know what to do. We're just going to fail out. And we don't want that to happen. That's bad. We want to be able to anticipate things that could happen and give the code alternate paths. You do not want to overplan for this, though. Okay? You don't want to just catch everything and then just write an error message. Although writing an error message to an error log is absolutely acceptable. But what you don't want is, hey, anytime I get an exception, just ignore it. Right? Because sometimes you need that information. If you ignore the exception when you're trying to read from the file or write to the file or whatever, then when you try to do the thing that you're going to do, it's going to crash again, or your data is going to be bad, and then in the future you're going to have bad data. It is not a good way to go. Okay, there is absolutely nothing wrong with writing an error message, but you can't only write an error message.